yaya Mikhael, tulombele kwa Mikhael watukembesa. Tulombele kwa Mikhael watukembesa.
Ancient man and his first civilizations. North African history. In many cases, the demographic history of North Africa closely parallels that of the United States, in that Europeans, and in this case Turks also, first colonize, and then the descendants of the colonizers fight a war of liberation from their original homelands, for sole claim to the conquered territories. And as in the Americas, the native populations were massacred, marginalized, impoverished, and relegated to the hinterlands. The difference being that Americans don't claim to be the native and original people. Okay, yes, there are albinos in the Americas who claim to be Native Americans, but that's mainly for gain in terms of land theft and such. It is assumed that they don't really believe their own one drop. Maybe so. I'm an Indian lies.as we can clearly see, the people European albinos claim to be native Middle Easterners, are really just albinos just like themselves, and they're albino mulattoes. In North Africa it's even more complicated, because not only must the Turks be accounted for, but also the branches of the Central Asian albinos who took over Europe, namely the Germanic Visigoths, Alans, and Vandals. Then to make it even more complicated, in current times, albinos from Spain, France, and Italy have already invaded North Africa and established government and societies. Not counting the latest usurpation of Libya. Thus one of the oddities of modern times is found in North Africa, where the mulattoes, quadroons, and octoroons of the white invaders, and even the white invaders themselves, proclaim themselves Berbers and the indigenous inhabitants of North Africa. To make the ridiculous even more ridiculous, many of these people also practice racial prejudice against Africans in Africa. In North Africa, many of these people declare themselves Berber under the banner of Amazi, possibly meaning free people or free and noble men. The word has probably an ancient parallel in the Roman name for some of the Berbers, Bezizes. The Amazi thus has apparently so distressed one actual Berber group, the Tuareg, that they are now disavowing their Berber heritage, and are instead proclaiming themselves to be Arabs. Tuareg. February 4, 2011, Tuareg reject allegations of the Congress Amazi World. The letter is as under. From Mr. Mansour Mohammed LaHood, out of his capacity as chairman of the Assembly of Mali called Youth Society North of the Republic of Mali, rejects the allegations of the World Amazi Congress, that the Tuareg people are Amazi. The Assembly of the Republic of Mali Youth North strongly rejects such nonsense and false stories claimed by Congress Amazi World through the media that the Tuareg of Mali and Niger are Amazi, and stresses that this claim is false, is not based on a scientific basis. And that Mr. Belkacem Lyons specializes in chemistry, who viewed this trend shameless, does not have any historical background to prove this myth, but proven by all history books, trusted that the Tuareg are of Arab descent, and crafts Tarji has to do with Arabic calligraphy. This is the asset Tarjip known since a long time immemorial, and we believe such stories would fall within the Tuareg of the elements of client-related third-party suspicious, and thus confirm and strongly that we will not allow the Congress of the World Amazi has nothing to do with us as an intervention in our affairs and talk about our origins. This we, children of the Tuareg in Kidal, Go and Timbuktu, we are proud Bhutan, Mali and Niger, to which we belong, and our religion, Islam, and declare that our is to achieve security and stability, peace and development in the Sahara for the happiness of our peoples and coexistence with the sons of the tribes of the Sahara, and that this is the position of all the Tuareg, who are struggling to achieve, and to work strenuously for it in every time and place. Mansur Mohammed al-LaHood, President of the General Assembly. There is no telling what will happen when the Tuareg find out that the very Same type of invader descends people are in the north and Arabia, also proclaiming themselves to be Arabs. Before going on, let us first investigate another term for Berbers, Moors. Moor is problematic because of its shifting significance. Isidore of Seville, who died well before Islam came to Iberia, follows Roman usage in referring to northwest Africa as Mauritania, from which Moris Moro is derived on account, he says, of its inhabitants' blackness. Similarly, the Visigothic chronicler John of Biclaro refers to the inhabitants of pre-Islamic North Africa as Moors. Wolf 1990, 64. The so-called Mozarabic Chronicle of 754, written by a Christian living in Al-Andalus under Muslim rule, and the earliest surviving account of the events of 711, speaks of the invading force of Muslims without racial animus as Arabs and Moors. Wolf 1990, 131. These texts suggest that early on Moor signified Berber. African origin is clearly marked in this usage. Later documents authored in the Christian kingdoms of Iberia attest to the complete transformation of Moor from a term signifying Berber into a general term for Muslims living in Iberian territory, lands conquered recently by Christendom, and secondarily, for Muslims residing in what was, or was since left of, Al-Andalus. For example, the Chronicle of Najera 12th century Leon refers to Abd al-Rahman I, the Umayyad Emir of mid-8th century Al-Andalus, as king of the Mori, and to Abd al-Rahman II, the 10th century Umayyad Caliph, as the consummate Moris. An elegiac passage from the 13th century Primera Chronica General chapter 559 General Chronicle of Spain recounts the events of 711 for what is construed as the temporary downfall of Spain in that year. The text testifies that semantic transformation of Moor was not nearly as benign as some readers have assumed. Their faces were black as pitch. The handsomest among them was black as a cooking pot, and their eyes blazed like fire. Their horses swift as leopards, their horsemen more cruel and hurtful than the wolf that comes at night to the flock of sheep. The vile African people. Smith 1988, 19. Here the historiography sponsored by Alfonso X of Castile shares a vocabulary developed across the Pyrenees in the early 12th century Chanson de Roland, wherein the Saracen Abysm is stigmatized as brutish on account of his race. In all that host was none more vile than he, with evil vice and crimes he's dyed full deep, and black is he as melted pitch to see. Better he loves murder and treachery than all the gold that is in Gallici. Song of Roland, 113. Sayers 1975, 108. All of the above gives us good examples of how the word Moor was used, but not what the word Moor originally meant. Logically, the word Moor could not possibly have meant black because that would make no sense. We know that the original Iberian Spain Portugal were black people. We know without a doubt that North Africans including Egyptians were black people. We know that at the earlier times mentioned, the people of the Levant Phoenicians and others were purely black people. Question: if Moor, and the other words mean black, then how would that differentiate anyone from anyone? Obviously Moor meaning black doesn't work. Also it should be obvious that the Berbers didn't call themselves Moors, that is what others called them. From Etymological Dictionary of Modern English, Moor waste ground, Old English Moor morass, swamp, from Proto-Germanic Moorus cf. Old Saxon, Middle Dutch, Dutch meer swamp, Old High German muur swamp, also see, German moor, Old Norse mr moorland, marsi, perhaps related to mere n. Or from root mer to die, hence dead land. Certainly no blondes or mulattoes there. So, let us investigate how this sad and strange state of affairs came to be. Prehistory of Central North Africa. Early inhabitants of the Central Maghreb have left behind significant remains. Early remnants of hominid occupation in North Africa were found in Ain el-Haniq, near Saa, Algeria ca. 200,000 BC. Later, Neanderthal tool makers produced hand axes in the Levalloisian and Mousterian styles ca. 43,000 BC, similar to those in the Levant. According to some sources, North Africa was the site of the highest state of development of Middle Paleolithic flake tool techniques. Tools of this era, starting about 30,000 BC, are called Aterian after the site Bur el Ader, south of Annaba, and are marked by a high standard of workmanship, great variety, and specialization. The cave paintings at Tassili en Adjur. So far so good, at least we know that whites first showed up after the Tassili en Adjur art was created. The cave paintings found at Tassili en Adjur, north of Tamanrasset, an oasis city and capital of Tamanrasset province in southern Algeria, in the Hagar Mountains. It is the chief city of the Algerian Tuareg, and at other locations depict vibrant and vivid scenes of everyday life in the central Maghreb, the fertile coastal plain of North Africa, west of Tunisia between about 8000 BC and 4000 BC. They were executed by a hunting people in the Capsian period named after the town of Gafsa in Tunisia. It was a Mesolithic culture of the Maghreb, which lasted from about 10,000 to 6,000 BC. It was concentrated mainly in modern Tunisia, Algeria and Cyrenaica, a part of ancient Libya, with some sites attested in southern Spain to Sicily. These were people of the Neolithic age, who lived in a savanna region teeming with giant buffalo, elephant, rhinoceros, and hippopotamus, animals that no longer exist in the now desert area. Tamanrasset. The Tassili en Adjur was ranked a World Heritage in 1982 by the UNESCO. The Tassili en Adjur is located in the central Sahara to the southeast of Algeria. It is limited by the Libyan border to the east, and that of Niger in the south. The name Tassili means Traitamashik Berber language and designates a huge sandstone plateau of 350,000 km to whose height ranges between 500 and 2,200 meters. It includes 10,000 rock art sites and more than 15,000 drawings and etchings, since 6000 BC. The earliest blade industries in North Africa are called the Baro-Maurusian or Oranian after a site near Oran, northwestern Mediterranean coast of Algeria. The industry appears to have spread throughout the coastal regions of the Maghreb between 15,000 and 10,000 BC. Between about 9,000 and 5,000 BC, the Capsian culture began influencing the Ibero-Maurusian, and after about 3000 BC, the remains of just one human type can be found throughout the region. Neolithic civilization marked by animal domestication and subsistence agriculture developed in the Saharan and Mediterranean Maghreb between 6000 and 2000 BC. This type of economy, so richly depicted in the Tassili en Adjur cave paintings, predominated in the Maghreb until the Classical period. The amalgam of peoples of North Africa coalesced eventually into a distinct native population that came to be called Berbers. Distinguished primarily by cultural and linguistic attributes, the Berbers lacked a written language and hence tended to be overlooked or marginalized in historical accounts. Roman, Greek, Byzantine, and Arab Muslim chroniclers typically depicted the Berbers as barbaric enemies, troublesome nomads, or ignorant peasants. They were, however, to play a major role in the area's history. Like all blacks in their native innocence, the Tamanrasitites take everyone and everything at face value. They are unconcerned that their ancestral lands are ruled by the descendants of the invading conquerors of their lands, and killers of their people. They see only the good in everyone and everything. Obama rally. Just as there is always ancient black art, there are always degenerate white people who will create fake artifacts so as to make the claim that white people were a part of the ancient population. This is of course impossible, except for parts of Central Asia, but that fact has never stopped whites from pursuing the fantasy. Such a person is the Frenchman Henry LaHood. In 1933, a French soldier remembered as Lieutenant Brionons ventured into a deep wadi in the Tuareg and Adjur Plateau and discovered the rock art. LaHood, a pupil of the great expert on prehistoric cave art in France Abbé Brill, was in Algeria at the time and heard about the discovery. He met the soldier at Jeanette, learned all he could, then and mounted an expedition to investigate it. Working with the support of the Mustalham, LaHood and his associates discovered about 800 paintings, many of which he later made images of with the aid of painters and photographers. These images were presented in 1957 and 1958 at the Musée des Arts Décoratifs in Paris and were, in the opinion of Andrew Malraux, one of the most defining exhibitions of the mid-century. After thoroughly exploring and uncovering many more images, LaHood publicized the hypothesis that the humanoid drawings represented space aliens. In the search for the Tuareg frescoes, the story of the prehistoric rock paintings of the Sahara first published in France in 1958 and in London in 1959, LaHood called one particularly large and curious figure as Jabron and described him as the Great Martian God. The popular press gave much attention to LaHood's hypothesis of a prehistoric close encounter, and it was later incorporated into the sensationalist claims made by Eric von Duyken that ancient extraterrestrial astronauts visited prehistoric Earth. Some of the rock art faked by Henry LaHood. According to the Encyclopaedia Britannica, a vivid dance scene that LaHood discovered in 1956 can be attributed on stylistic grounds to Neolithic hunters that lived in the Sahara circa 6000 to 4000 BC. Mainstream scientists regard the Great Martian God and other rock art figures that are similar to it as representations of ordinary humans in ritual masks and costumes rather than the representations of extraterrestrial lithoforms. The value of LaHood's scholarship was also challenged by the Journal of North African Studies, an academic journal affiliated with the University of East Anglia. Many of the claims of the expedition's leader, Henry LaHood, were misleading. A number of the paintings were faked, and the copying process was fraught with errors. The discovery can only be understood within the political and cultural context of the time, namely the Algerian Revolution, France's attempt to partition Algeria, and the prevailing views of the Abbé Brill, the arch-advocate of foreign influence in African rock art. The expedition's methods caused extensive damage to the rock art, while the accompanying looting of cultural objects effectively sterilized the archaeological landscape. Any restitution process must necessarily include a full recognition of what was done and the inappropriateness of the values. Fake artifacts made to look like white people are not harmless. The racist fake artwork of the South African painter Winifred Brunton, created in the early 20th century, fueled the myth of white Egyptians. Winifred Brunton was there. She saw firsthand what the ancient Egyptians actually looked like. But seeking to benefit monetarily from the yearnings of whites to have an ancient history, she cynically created fake artwork of white Egyptians to satisfy their need. Even today, many ignorant whites still believe that ancient Egyptians were white people. Winifred Brunton (1880–1959) was a painter and the daughter of Charles Newbery (1841–1922), who immigrated to South Africa in 1864, and became a major shareholder in Cecil Rhodes Central Mining Company, which later became De Beers. She was also the South African wife of British Egyptologist Guy Brunton, who excavated at LaHood with Sir Flinders Petrie, as well as at other sites later in his career. Later, Guy Brunton served as assistant keeper of the Cairo Museum in 1931. Winifred illustrated many of the objects in her husband's excavation reports, including items from the tomb of Tutankhamun discovered by Howard Carter. Most Egyptian enthusiasts will be familiar with her artwork that, relative to Egypt, mostly consists of portraits. Her work was carried out in the early part of the 20th century and published as illustrations in 2 volumes consisting of Kings and Queens of Ancient Egypt 1926 and Great Ones of Ancient Egypt 1929. Today these books are highly collectible. Examples of Winifred Brunton's racist and false handiwork: King Tutankhamun Tut, King Tut's wife Queen Ankhesenamun, King Horemheb's wife Queen Metnejmet, Queen Nefertiti, King Pepi Queen Hatshepsut, Queen of Teta, King Tuthmosis III Queen Tai. Tunisia, Carthage and the Berbers. Phoenician traders arrived on the North African coast around 900 BC and established Carthage in present-day Tunisia around 800 BC. By the 6th century BC, a Phoenician presence existed at Tipasa east of Tripoli in Algeria. From their principal center of power at Carthage, the Carthaginians expanded and established small settlements called emporia in Greek along the North African coast. These settlements eventually served as market towns as well as anchorages. Hippo Regius modern Annaba and Rusicade modern Skikda are among the towns of Carthaginian origin on the coast of present-day Algeria. As Carthaginian power grew, its impact on the indigenous population increased dramatically. Berber civilization was already at a stage in which agriculture, manufacturing, trade, and political organization supported several states. Trade links between Carthage and the Berbers in the interior grew, but territorial expansion also resulted in the enslavement or military recruitment of some Berbers and in the extraction of tribute from others. By the early 4th century BC, Berbers formed the single largest element of the Carthaginian army. In the revolt of the mercenaries, Berber soldiers rebelled from 241 to 238 BC after being unpaid following the defeat of Carthage in the First Punic War. They succeeded in obtaining control of much of Carthage's North African territory, and they minted coins bearing the name Libyan, used in Greek to describe natives of North Africa. The Carthaginian state declined because of successive defeats by the Romans in the Punic Wars. The Third Punic War in the spring of 146 BC, Roman general Scipio Aemilianus launched his final assault. On the 7th day Carthage surrendered wholesale, 50,000 men, women, and children giving themselves up to slavery. Scipio rewarded his men with time to plunder the city at their leisure. That done, the remainder of the city was set ablaze and burned for 10 days. Rome decreed that no house should be built nor crop planted there. But 102 years later, the city was refounded by Julius Caesar in 44 BC, and became the capital of the enlarged province of Africa. By the 2nd century AD, Carthage had become the largest city in the West after Rome. The new Roman Carthage became first a famous educational center, especially for law and rhetoric, and then a focus for Christianity in the West, especially in the time of Tertullian and Cyprian 2nd and 3rd centuries AD. Carthage fell to the Vandals in 439 AD, and became the capital of their king Gaiseric, but after the victory of Belisarius' Byzantine general in 533, it remained loyal to the Roman Empire in the east, until the Arab conquest at the end of the 7th century, when it was destroyed a second time in 698 AD.